Good evening, everyone.
Hey, good evening, Rabbi.
Sorry to make you wait. I apologize. Yeah, we'll finish the chapter. The next one.
Your volume is very low, Rabbi.
I'll fix that. Thank you. Let's see what we can do here. Let's see what we can do. Oh, it's over here. Yeah, you were right. Okay. It should be better now. Okay, so I don't know why that happens, but anyway, so it says here we got to see inside the tour. So it says over here like this. הרואה דמות גילולים של עובד גילולים, אומר ברוך אתה השם אלוקים מלך העולם, שנתן ערך אפיים לעוברי רצונו. Okay, well, so what is he talking about here? He saw, a place of idolatry, where they served the idols there. So what does that mean? It's like an idolatrous statue. So believe it or not, there's a blessing on that too. Okay, so what's the blessing? He says, right, ברוך אתה השם אלוקינו מלך העולם, שנתן ערך אפיים לעוברי רצונו. Oh, wow. So what does it mean? He gave, right, he granted, he was patient with the sinners, with the ones who transgress his will. So meaning what? That he's patient with them and doesn't punish them, right away, even though they're doing idolatry. Okay. So then he says, "הרואה מקום שנקרא ממנו דמות גילולים." What about if he sees a place where the idolatry was uprooted from there, it was abolished? So there he says, Baruch Atah Hashem. Sorry, yeah. So he says like this, Imhu Beretz Israel, if he's in Eretz Israel. What does he say there? Baruch Atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam, she'akar demut gilulim, shel avodah zarah me'artzenu. We say, right, that we thank him that he uprooted the idolatry from our land. If it's outside in diaspora, אומר שקע דמות גילויים של לגלות במקום זה. He uprooted idolatry in this place, right? So in other words, the only difference between one blessing and the other is that one is in this place, and the other one, right, which is in Israel, says in our land. But besides that, it's the same, text there. Okay. Then he goes on. Um, כתב רמב"ם, right? רמב"ם says, ז"ל, ואומר, בשתיהם כשם שעקרת אותו מקום הזה, כך תעקור אותו מכל מקומות. And he says, right, you also have to add this little declaration. Just like you uprooted it here in this place, you should also uproot it in every place. Okay? וישב לב עבדיהם לעבדיך. So he says, you should return their heart to serve you. ואיני יודע למה פוסק כדברי היחיד. So he says, I don't know why he's poskening like a single opinion, minority, whatever. The Rashba hu de Amar Hachi. So he said because the Rashba said this, about the Tanakama, but according to Tanakama, right, the first opinion, אין עוד צריך לומר כן, you don't have to say that. אלא בארץ ישראל, שרובה ישראל, only in Eretz Israel where mostly are Jews there, אבל לא בחוץ לארץ, but not in the diaspora. So one thing you need to know here, right, which is that this this Rashba here is not the Rashba that we usually quote. This is a different guy. So which Rashba is this? So this Rashba is from the Talmud, right? Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar, that's his name, right? So he's the one who's arguing with the Tanakama, with the first opinion, right? In other words, so we have here machloket in the Tanaim, in the Talmud there. And so he says we don't paskin like the Rashba, right? That Rashba, not this guy, not our Rashba. So and so he says we go like the first opinion, which is the majority of the rabbis. We go like the majority. And according to them, you don't need to say this declaration. Only in Eretz Israel, it says, where it's mostly Jews there. Okay, interesting stuff. Did you ever see somebody who does this today? Fat chance, right? Okay, so let's go to Beit Yosef. So he also quotes another part of the tour which we didn't see yet. So I'm gonna go back there and check where this is because we didn't catch it. I suspect that the reason why I don't see this in the tour is because they have a different text, the Bet Yosef and our tour. So I'm going to read the Bet Yosef and see what he says. We'll get to the bottom of it. God willing. Okay, so it says here Bit Yosef, that it comes from this tour comes from Perek Haroeh. So where is that? It's in Brachot, Nun Zayin Amud Bet. And it says there, ראה את המרכוליס, אומר ברוך שנתן ערך אפיים לעוברי רצונו. It says there, right, that if a person sees Marcolis, so he's going to make this blessing, right, that we saw before, which is that he gives, he's very patient with the ones who transgress his will. There's all kinds of names, but long suffering, I don't know, whatever, right, all kinds of stuff. So and so you guys know what's Marcolis? You aware what that is? So Marcolis is like a type of idolatry, but it's a peculiar one. Why is that? Because the way you serve it is like by throwing stones at it. Okay, that's the service that it has. But it's basically, a type of idolatry, right? More or less, right? Same thing. It's all the same. So that's the blessing he makes. So in other words, in the Talmud, he doesn't mention, any idolatry. He says markolis, particularly that one. So we'll see what kind of significance that has. So then he moves on. Katav Rabbeinu Yonah, right? It says Rabbeinu Yonah, Yesh mefarshim dehu adin leshar avodah zarah. Oh, so some say, right, that also applies to other idols. It's all the same. As we said, right. What difference does it make? They're all the same. אלא שאמר זו שהיו עובדים אותה בימיהם יותר. So he says the reason why he mentioned this guy, Marcolis, is because it was very common in their days, right? This idolatry, was very widespread. Interesting. Wow. Okay, that's one thing. יש מפרשים דווקא נחת מרקוליס. Some say he means really Marcolis, like really that one, only that one. מפני שדרכן להשליך לאבנים. Why? Because as we said, right, the way they serve it is by throwing stones on it. ולאותם אבנים שמשליכים הם עובדים. So he says, what happens is like this, right? When they throw stones on that idol, it also becomes a part of the idol. It becomes like one unit. How strange, right? So meaning what? That now those rocks that you threw, right, at that idol became the idol itself. It's like now bigger, it's larger, it's growing. So this is the concept of this idol, which is that you throw stones, and it just gets bigger and bigger. This guy becomes like a monster. Oh boy, what can I tell you? But it just goes to show you, by the way, how ridiculous these idolaters are. They do such ridiculous things. They're absolutely ridiculous. And same thing today. The idolatry that we have today, they're all ridiculous. These things. Absolutely ridiculous. Only a fool would believe this kind of stuff. But okay, anyway, this is what it is. You have to be a total idiot to believe this stuff. But the Rambam does say, by the way, I've posted this already a couple of times, that Christianity is idolatry. So if that's the case, whatever we whatever we say here also applies to that as well. That's the way it turns out. Okay, so hold that thought. We'll come back to that, right? When we get some more clarity here. Okay, so let's move on. So he says, right, this is the reason why, according to this opinion, dafka, particularly this idolatry, which like grows, expands, as you go on. So regarding that one, they made this blessing, not regarding the other idolatry. But as we said, right, according to the Torah, right, the text we have over there is that it's all idolatry. It doesn't matter which one it is. It's all the same. Okay, so we're kind of starting to right solve the puzzle a little bit right here. Okay, then he brings Tosfot, right? It says Tosfot, כתוב תחילה, זה בתוספתא, תנא במקום הרואה מרכוליס, הרואה עבודה זרה. Right, oh, there you go. Oh. Now we're getting somewhere. Right, so Tosfot says, you know what? In the Tosefta, it really doesn't say Markolis, it says Avodah Zarah. So there you go, right? We have a different text which just plainly says Avodah Zarah. Seems to me, fairly clear that that's the more correct answer. That we're talking about any idolatry, right? Not just that particular one, right? With the stones. Okay. Vein ken lav davka markolis. So it says if that's the case, right? According to that text, it's not only markolis, right? V'chakach katvu, and then afterwards he writes perush ri. He explains lo yadana amay nakit markolis. He also asks this question, right? I don't know why he mentions markolis. Right? What's so special about that one? יותר משאר עבודה זרה, more than the other idolatry. ונראה לי שאין צריך לברך רק במקום שבונים עבודה זרה. So it seems to me, he says, uh-huh. So now he has some kind of a qualification here. That's interesting. What's the qualification? You don't have to place in a place where they're building the idol. שעומדה שם מחדש, that will just put, or it will just put there now. In other words, it was just completed, They just completed it. לכן נקת מרכוליס שרוגמים בה בכל יום. That's the reason why he says he mentioned Markolis, which we said, right? They stone it every day. בכל יום, והווה כמגדל עבודה זרה. So it becomes like he says, idolatrous tower. Oh, okay. אבל לא על עבודה זרה קבועה שם מקום, בכלם. But it says not something, which was there for a long time. ודת רבנו כפירוש ראשון. So he says, Bet Yosef concludes that Rabbeinu holds like the first opinion, right? That we saw. Okay, that's clear. So then he has one more piece over here. והיידנא אין לנו מברכים אותה לפי שאנו ביניהם ורואים אותם כל יום. Oh, comes the tour and tells you now, right? This is the punchline over here, right? Aha. Tells you nowadays we don't make this blessing, right? As I told you in the beginning, right? Go try to find somebody who does this blessing. Fat chance, right? So he says we don't do it. Why is that? So he says, you know why? because we're amongst them, all the time, and we see them every day, you know. So you guys understand why we don't bless every day? You remember what we said about that? We said, right, that for these blessings you need like a 30-day interval, if you recall. So therefore, here you don't have a 30-day interval. You sing it every day. You go outside, you see that big cross, you know what I mean? And that the tall, building, right, with the cross, and with those funky, shapes and, right, curvatures and all that stuff, right? You see it all the time. Especially in those days, by the way, in Europe, if you anywhere you would go, there would be a church there. Like you couldn't avoid it.
It's the
Uh,
same right now.
I'm
Every
sorry.
in every corner you go, there's a church. Yes.
Are you talking about in Dallas?
No, in Europe
Oh, yeah, it's the same. Nothing has changed. Yeah, of course.
has changed. Yeah.
Nothing has changed. Yeah. You know, those old churches are still around. You know what I mean? They've been around for, hundreds of years, some of them even more. So that's the thing, So you would see the church every day. By the way, I'm also, guilty as charged. I go outside, there's a church like a block away from my house. So what can I do,
Imagine living in the Bible Belt.
Oh boy.
Churches everywhere. Yes.
Well, yeah, over there, the truth is that it's not only the churches, they are very anti-Semitic there. A lot of the people. They hate Jews. They have a lot of gripes against the Jews there. So, you get that, discrimination as well in those areas, the Bible Belt. Okay, all kinds of things going on there. I'm not going to get into that right now, right? We're not discussing that, but anyway, right? The point is that since we see these churches like on a daily basis, by the way, the truth is, I have to tell you honestly, like I've been around in America, I've driven around here, there, you know, there's a church everywhere, like everywhere you look, there's a church, you know. So it may not be as bad as Europe, but it's pretty bad actually. Also in America, same thing. What do you call it? Just like in this area, there's like I don't know, probably 10 churches here. I don't know how many. I don't know how many there are exactly, but there's a lot of them. They're all over the place. That's the thing, So since we have a situation like that, and we see these churches every day, so there's no way to bless on them, because as we said, right, we need a 30-day interval. All right. So therefore, he says, right, the custom is now not to bless on them. By the way, according to what we just said, you could probably get away, with doing it at least once in your lifetime. You know what I mean? Because you've never blessed. So if you really want to like get into this blessing, you want to get into it. So, you could probably get away with it because you've never done it in your life. So at least one time you can do it. So I'm thinking about that now. I'm entertaining that thought. Okay. All right. We'll see, right? I love to make blessings, I love blessings. What can I tell you? I love them. They're fantastic. As the Zohar Kadosh says, right? Every time you bless Hashem, He blesses you. It's like a reflex, It's a rebound. Boom, comes right back at you. So that's great, who can be against that? Honestly, I have to tell you, here's a punchline, right? Here's the clincher that even in Israel, there are churches everywhere. You can't even get away from them over there. Especially in Jerusalem, Jerusalem, there are a lot of churches. But the thing is, they're not in every neighborhood though, they're like in particular neighborhoods. So, if you don't go in those neighborhoods, you won't see them. If you stay like in the Haredi quote unquote neighborhoods, right? Religious neighborhoods, you're not going to see churches there. I mean, obviously, but you will see them, like all over the place. If you go around, you'll see them. Yeah, you're gonna find them. And they're active too, they're active. They have services and everything. Idolatry in the Holy Land. God save us from them. What can we do? God save us. So, the truth is, right, that we're commanded from the Torah, when we go and conquer Eretz Israel, we have to uproot all the idolatry there, So, but we can't do it because of peaceful relations, we can't do that right now. They would kill us if we did that. You know what I mean? So we avoid these kinds of things, We don't want to get into a confrontation with the Goyim at this point. This is not the time for that. The time will come. So right now we're worried about, just, saving our lives. That's what we're worried about right now. Okay. The zealotry will come later, There'll be a time to be a zealot. Okay, whatever, right? Okay. So uh so that's what the Torah says, right? Says Bet Yosef on this. Ken katvu shama Tosfot. Tosfot also writes this. Ve'ata mipnei shekol shehu ro'eh betoch 30 yom. As we said, right? The 30-day interval. This is the problem, And not tzarich lavarich. You don't have to bless. K'mosh katav Rabbeinu b'siman. So it really comes out from here, The implication is you could do it one time. At least that much. You know? If you're a courageous guy, you're one of those courageous ones. You're a gutsy one, Then you could probably get away with it. Yes, yes. All right, sounds good to me. Anyway, let's see Shulchan Aruch, right? Let's see what it says. Yeah, so we do have to bring up the new Shulchan Aruch, right? Because it's a new chapter. So let's try that. Let's bring it up. Reish Chav Dalid. Okay, we're not so far from Shabbat. We're getting closer. Probably sometime after the holiday, we'll start Shabbat, there, right? God willing, Hashem help us. Okay, Okay. So it says over there like this, right? Haroeh Markolis or Sharabakum, right? Whether you see Markolis or any other idolatry. Omer Baruch Ata Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam shenatan erech apayim le'overei retzono, right? So as we said, right? That means he's long suffering to the ones who transgress his will. But if you see within 30 days, as we said, right, you don't bless again. So there you go, right? It's pretty simple, you can do it if you really want, at least one time, and then, right, subsequently, depends on how often you see the church, right? If you don't see it in 30 days, you could do it again. As I said, right, I don't have this luxury because it's right in front of my house, So I don't think that's going to happen very often with me here until I move to a better location. Okay. So anyway, says the Rama. So he says now the custom is not to make it, as we said, right? Why? Because we see them all the time, So how can you make it, right? But as I said, you can do it one time. Indeed, you can. I think I'm gonna go do this, billionaire. I'm gonna go for it. Blessings are beautiful. Sounds good to me. This is the beauty of the Bet Yosef, Once you learn the sugya, the Bet Yosef, you really understand like what the halacha is. You get all the angles, and everything there, So there's nothing compares to that, I have to tell you. No other book teaches you halacha like this. That's why the Chida used to say, "Alav Shalom." Person who doesn't learn Bet Yosef, he cannot paskin halacha asur. You can only paskin if you learn the Bet Yosef. All right, there you go. So let's see what we got here. Going to bet. Okay. But the truth is, we also had Yud Gimel there, in the Bet Yosef. So let's go to Yud Gimel. Let's skip down and do that one. Why not? Might as well. Got nothing to lose. Okay, so it says over here, right? Called brachot harayah, right? So it says any blessing of sight, of seeing something, right? Im chazar bera'ah oto betoch lamed yom, eno chozer merech. So this is a general rule, right? This is a very important rule, as we said. We already stated it. That we have that 30-day interval rule. So whatever you do, you bless when you see something, it's only once every 30 days. That's the rule, it's a golden rule. So, you got to keep it. If you don't listen to this rule, and you bless all the time, it's going to be a blessing in vain, so it's too bad. It's a big sin, don't do that. Right, as I mentioned to you guys, when you go to the Kotel, in Jerusalem, also same thing, right? It has to be once every 30 days, because if you go there like very often, you can't bless every time you go there. To do all that, ritual, tearing your shirt, all that stuff, right? It only happens once every 30 days. So now when I go to Israel after the holiday, I'll be ripping another shirt. Billionaire. Okay. So because I haven't been there for a while, not not a lot more than 30 days. It's been like almost a year. Okay, great. So that's that. So now we'll go back to bet. Let's go to Bet Yosef. This tour we already did. So it says tour like this, right? The Bet Yosef. We said in the tour that if you see a place where idolatry was uprooted, right? So there's a special blessing there. If it's in Eretz Israel, so forth, so on. So regarding this, right, says the Bet Yosef, he brings a source for this. Perek Aro'eh Tanan, right? Because we learned in the Mishnah in this brachot. Nun dal damud aleph. So it says there that if he sees a place where idolatry was uprooted there, so what do you say? Blessed is the one who uprooted idolatry from our land, right? So we're talking about Eretz Israel. It says in Yusham brachot, Mefaresh Dainu Meretz Yisrael, talking about Eretz Israel, as we said. But if it was uprooted from a different place, right? Omer Baruch Shakar Avodah Zarah Mi'amakom Hazeh. Then you say from this place. You don't say from our land, right? Because it's not our land. Okay. Katva Rosh, right? Okay, fine. So, right, then the Rosh, so it says in Bet Yosef, V'Grasinan Tu B'Gemara, it says in furthermore in the Gemara, Nun Zayin Amud Bet, Tan Rabbanan Haro'eh Makom Shenekam Min Avodah Zarah. If you see a place where idolatry was uprooted from there, Omer, Baruch Shakar Avodah Zarah Mi'arseinu. So you say like this, right? That blessed is the one who uprooted idolatry from our land, as we said. And then you continue according to this the text, just like it was uprooted from this place. It should be uprooted from every place, right? Okay. Mekomot Yisrael, from all places of the Jews. That's what it says. Ve'ashev lev ovdehem levdecha. And he says, right, return the hearts of the ones who serve the idols back to you, to serve you. Chutz ha'laaretz, but in the diaspora, en tzarich lomar ve'ashev lev ovdehem levdecha. Don't say, right, they should go back to serve you, because they never served you in the first place. Okay. Rabbi Shimon ben Lazar Omer, says Rabbi Shimon ben Lazar, this is the Rashba, right, that we saw in the tour, right? This guy, right? As we said, right? It's not the Rashba that we usually mention. So he says, you have to say, and also it says outside the land of Israel as well. According to him, right? Oh, look what he says. So he says, you know why? Because they're all going to convert anyway in the end. Right? As it says in the Pasuk, right? Tzfania, ki az efoch elamim safa brura. He says, I'm gonna bring back the nations, right, to a clear tongue, right? So what does that mean? They're gonna talk Hebrew, like all of us. Right. By the way, when it says here, just to clarify, right, that they're all destined to convert, it's not really like a real conversion, though. We're talking here about they're gonna start doing Jewish customs. Because as we said, right, in those days we're not going to accept converts anymore. The conversion time is over, right? That's it. When that happens, right? When the redemption occurs, no more conversions. So what is he talking about here? It's not really conversion like we're talking about. It's more like, they're gonna repent. That's what it means, right? Come back to the true faith. Okay. Great. So then it goes on the tour. Mashkatav Rabbeinu B'Shem Rambam. So that's what Rabbeinu said in the Ram the Rambam, right? That you have to add also that other thing that we mentioned. And then he criticizes it, right? And saying, so I don't know why Paskins like the single opinion. You should Paskin like the rabbis. So Bit Yosef comments on that tour. Eno mechuvan says it's not really correct what he's saying here. Why? The mashma shema omer b'shtehem kishem shakarta implies that which he says, right? Just like you uprooted, you should uproot this and that, etc. Who divrei yachid? It's a minority opinion according to this. Mashma deno ken. So he says, but really the truth is, it implies in the Gemara that it's not so. Because he says you really have to say this declaration according to all the opinions, he says. So therefore it's not really a single opinion. And he says that what you said is both of them. Only this part, right? You should bring them back to serve you. So that's the way it says the language of Rabbeinu should be. So now look what he says, right? He says really the text in the Torah should be avodah zarah and not markolis. If it's going to be outside the land of Israel, you say, right, you uproot idolatry from this place. So you say in both of them, right, just like you just like you uprooted from this place, you should uproot it from every place. Katav Rambam, Shomer b'shtehem ve'ashev lev ovdehem le'avodecha. And then the Rambam adds, right, also say this, bring them back to serve you. I don't know why you write Paskins like the single opinion. So it could be, he says, that the Torah holds that even this, when you say, just like you uprooted here, uproot everywhere, so that could be that he says that he thinks that what the same there is Israel, where mostly people are Jews there. But outside the land of Israel, most of them are going there. So there we don't really care, We don't really care if it gets uprooted or not. Uh-huh. Okay, well. Now what you said, right, outside the land of Israel, you don't have to say, right, to return the heart of the ones who serve them to serve you. Lav Dafka, he says, not precise. Also, he says the same thing applies. He doesn't have to say this thing, just like you uprooted here, right, uproot everywhere. So he says, Ella, but he says, however, it's a little bit difficult, a little bit forced. ואם כן, ברוך שעקר עבודה זרה, שהמקום הזה נמי לא לברך. So if that's the case, you shouldn't even, bless the blessing at all. לעניין מה שתמה רבנו על הרמב"ם, so it says, regarding the question that Rabbeinu, right, the Tur had on the Rambam, למה פסק כיחיד? Why did he pass like a single opinion? יש לומר משום דמסתבר טעמה פסק כבטא. Oh, so he answers the answer, right? So he says, really, probably the Rambam, why Paskin like the minority opinion is because his words make more sense. That's why Paskin more like him. Aha. The Tanakama Nami. So it's also the first opinion, right? The first Tana. Lo asar. He didn't really forbid Ken ela she'ano tzarich. What he didn't really say it's forbidden. He just said that's not necessary. Okay. But if he wants to say could, he has optional, right? He could say it. Then there's nothing wrong with that. But Rabbi Shimon ben Lazar matzrich. But he says this rabbi, the Rashba, right? He requires it, Shomarken, to say that. Ve'im lo yamar avid velo ke Rabbi Shimon. If he didn't say it, he didn't do like Rabbi Shimon Lazar. Hilkach lememar adif. So it says better to say it then. The lo paliga shum tana, because he's not really arguing with anybody here. Krasin Yerushalmi, right? It says in Yerushalmi, it says shenekra v'lazar makom echad. It says like this: if idolatry was uprooted from one place, so then what happened, right? It got transferred to a different location. So what about that, right? Makom shenetna omer baruch shenatan. So you got to make both blessings, right? The place that it left, you make that blessing, right? That it left, and the place where it came, now you're going to make the blessing where it came. In other words, it switches the roles, right? You get my point? Okay. So okay, the Katula Tosot writes this. Okay, wow. Okay, good. That's the Yerushalmi. All right, fantastic. So we're done with this Bet Yosef, which was Bet. Okay, so let's go to Shulchan Aruch. A lot of interesting stuff here, and then we have Gimel Dal, very short. So let's see. Maybe we can do Bet Gimel Dal, and maybe we'll try. No promises. Okay. So it says over here, Haroem makom shenekra akum, right? If you see a place where idolatry was uprooted, right? Im hu beretz Yisrael, if it says there, it's Israel, Omer, what do you say? Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam she'akar akum me'atzenu. You uprooted idolatry from our land. Ve'im hu bechutz la'aretz, if it's in chutz la'aretz, if it's outside diaspora, Omer she'akar makom makom hazeh. You say this place, right, instead of our land. Ve'omer b'shtehen, and you say in both of them, Kishem shakarta ota me'amakom hazeh, just like you uprooted, right, from this place. Ken ta'akor ota mikol makomot v'yeshev uprooted from all the places and return them to serve you. So in other words, he goes like the Rambam here, with the full deluxe, text over here, right? Complete text, unabridged, comprehensive. Even though the tour had some problems with this, right? But Yosef says, no problem, it's okay. We'll do like the Rambam. Don't worry about it. Don't worry about that. Okay, so great. Let's see the Rama. So it says the Rama, "Im nekra kol mekom echad." We need to know mekom acher. So he just brings back what we just saw in Beit Yosef, right? Which is if it got uprooted here and then it was transferred right to a different location, right? Relocation. The church moved right to a different location. Okay, so then right, what do we do? The place where it was uprooted, you say you bless it was uprooted, right? Like we said. And the place where it came in, now you start to bless over there, right? That the blessing where idolatry exists, like we said in the beginning, right? So in other words, when you have a chance like this where the church relocates, you can do two blessings there, right? You can knock off two blessings right there. Kill two birds with one stone. Okay? So yeah, we got a couple more minutes. Let's see what we can do. Maybe we can knock it off a little bit. I don't know. We'll see. Couple more minutes. So it says over there like this, right? Oh my God. Oh, these are like really interesting, right? Sugyot here. So he says, right? You saw Babel Rasha. So what does this mean, right? You went to Iraq, and you saw that city, of Babylon. They still, by the way, that city still exists, It's like an ancient city. I don't know if anybody lives there, but it's like, it's ruins, basically. That's what it is today. There's a city of Babylon. So if you see that, which was like a wicked kingdom, right? Nebuchadnezzar, right? So there's a special blessing for that too. So it says Bet Yosef, right? Where is this? Also there, right? In that Gemara there. So let's go to Shulchan Aruch and see, right, what that blessing is, right? For the wicked Babylon. So it says over here like this, right? This is a really kind of strange kind of thing, shocking a little bit. So it says, Haroe Babel Risha. If you see Babel, right? In other words, the city, right? Of Babylon, the ancient city there. What do you say, Omer? Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam, shecharib Babel Risha. The blessing says, right? You're blessing God that He destroyed the wicked Babylon. Wow. Pretty strong, huh? Ra'ah beto shel Nebuchadnezzar. Oh my God. So now, right, he goes into more. What about if you saw the palace of Nebuchadnezzar, where he lived? Oh, today, right, we had Saddam Hussein, right? He was like the same guy. I think it was a reincarnation of that guy. So if you see the palace of Saddam, right? I'm joking, but it's really Nebuchadnezzar, right? But anyway, right, what do you bless there? Baruch she'echarib beto shel Nebuchadnezzar Rasha. You say, right? Blessed is the one who destroyed the house of Nebuchadnezzar the wicked. Oh my God. Look at that. Wow. So the rabbis made a special blessing for this particular, situation, which is kind of like, you would think, right? Why would they make a blessing just for this? Special, because you know why? Because Bavel, Nebuchadnezzar, this was a very sinful and wicked kingdom, who did great damage to the Jews. So we want to make a special blessing for them. They deserve it. With all the sins that they did, right? How they destroyed the temple, uprooted the Jewish people from the land, right? All that stuff. By the way, that already shows you, right, what's going to be coming, with Rome, right? One day we're going to be blessing the same thing with Rome. It's on the itinerary, right? It's the next online, as they say, right? Okay, fine. So then he says, right, another blessing. Gov arayot, right? Oh, kivshan ha'esh. Oh, so if he sees the lions, then right where Daniel was thrown in there. We already mentioned this before, by the way. And also the fire, the fiery furnace, right, where Mishael, Azariah, and his friend were thrown in there. That fiery furnace, right? Azariah, right? Mishael, Azariah, and the other one. So there's a blessing on that one too. Who threw them into that fiery furnace? It was also Nebuchadnezzar, right? So it's related to this whole thing, right? So what do you bless? Baruch she'asa nisim latzadikim b'makom hazeh. Blessed is the one who made with miracle for the righteous in this place. So this one we already covered, right, before, but he brings it here again because it's related to the whole topic of Babylon, right? The whole thing there. Babylon, yeah. So next time you go to visit Iraq, make sure you make these blessings, okay? All right, God bless you. Thanks for coming. Be blessed with wealth and health and happiness. Laila Tov, Chazak Baruch. And we'll see you, B'ezrat Hashem. Now, tomorrow, guys, Bedikat Chametz, right? So when we come home from shul, we do have to do the Bedikah. So I suggest, by the way, if it's okay with you guys, we have to start a little bit later, like let's say 9:30, is that okay with you guys?
Yes, it's fine.
Yeah, because there's really no other choice, because we have to finish the Bedikah. So if that's okay with you guys, we'll do it then. Okay, so fine. So we'll try to do it at 9:30. We'll see you, B'ezrat Hashem, tomorrow at 9:30, right? Which is going to be the last class before the holiday. Okay, Laila Tov, Chazak Baruch, all the best.
Thank you, Rabbi.
God bless.